class, let's start our discussion sa exempting circumstances. So, a while ago, we mentioned that there are actually 5 circumstances which modify or affect criminal liability. So, these are the following. So, kani si Gemma. So, J is for justifying circumstances. E, exempting circumstances. Mitigating circumstances. Aggravating circumstances. And alternative circumstances. So, do not forget your Gemma class. Okay? So, let's go to the second circumstance, which is the exempting circumstance. Exempting circumstances. So, there are actually 6 exempting circumstances, namely imbecility or insanity, minority accident, compulsion of irresistible force, impulse of uncontrollable fear, insuperable or lawful cause. Okay, so what is the concept of exempting circumstances, class? So exempting circumstances are those grounds for exemption from punishment because there is one thing, or meaning one thing, pasabot aning one thing, class, is lacking. There is lacking in the agent of the crime any of the conditions which make the act voluntary or negligent. Okay, so the reason for the exemption lies on the complete absence of intelligence, freedom of action or intent, or on the absence of negligence on the part of the accused. So, one who acts without intelligence, freedom of action, or intent does not act with malice or without dolo. Do you remember your Article 3? Ang criminal liability na to, di ba? Ang felony may be committed by means of dolo or culpa. So, kung without intelligence siya, without freedom, do you remember the kaning requirements of criminal kanang dolo, di ba? Naghisgot tayo ta last time og freedom, intelligence, unya criminal intent. Intent ang katong sa katapusan. So, sa culpa sad, ang iyang mga requirements are freedom, intelligence, and katong imprudence, negligence, lack of foresight, lack of skill. Mao na siya ang sa culpa. So, kung ang person acts without intelligence, freedom, or freedom of action or intent, he does not act with malice. So, wala siya dolo. So, kung ang person sad acts without intelligence, freedom of action, and without fault, does not act with negligence. So, wala po'y kulpa. So, mao na siya, class, ang very reason nganong naay gitawag og exempting circumstances because these are the circumstances na makapahimong exempt sa person or sa perpetrator sa crime by reason of complete lack of intelligence or freedom of action. Pero, magpasabot, again, na-mention ako ganina, wala magpasabot nga walay criminal act. Na-adjud siya ka ng krimen, na felony na nga na-commit. However, there is no criminal. Nga nung wala may criminal, tungod kay wala siya intelligence, wala siya freedom of action. So, these are the Article 12 enumerates the circumstances which exempt from criminal liability. So, these are the following. So, imbecility or insanity. So, an imbecile or an insane person unless the latter has acted during a lucid interval, exempt siya. Okay? So, a person under 9 years old, kanini ang 3 o 2 gali class, paragraphs 2 and 3, these have been modified by RA 9344. Ang 9344 mga good class, ang minimum age of responsibility is now 15 years or under. So, you will learn later on nga kung ang person gali or ang child is 15 years old or under, exempt na siya sa criminal liability. And, the law provides nga dili siya prisuhon o sa may mabuhat sa iyaha under your JJWA or your Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act as amended by RA 10630 nag-provide ni siya og mga avenue to respect the rights of children, especially those who are termed as CICL. Unsa man ni CICL? Mao ni sila ang gitawag og children in conflict with law. So the age of criminal responsibility again of the minors has been increased from 9 man ni siya before. Ang giingon sa revised penal code class, exempt ko na siya sa iyahang criminal liability kung ang person is under 9 years old. Mao ni siya ang giingon sa revised penal code sa una. However, gimodify naman ni siya nga 2 paragraphs class. Unsa naman ang minimum age of responsibility ani? Gi-increase siya. Unsa naman karon? From 9 years old before, karon 15 years old na siya. Okay? So, kaning paragraphs 2 and 3, again, you have to remember nga these sections have been modified by RA 9344 as amended by RA 10630. So, minority. Kanini siya, minority ni siya, dire dapita. Okay, sa 4th paragraph, any person who while performing a lawful act with due care causes injury by mere accident. So, accident po ni ang gihisgutan na to aning dire dapita sa paragraph 4. Paragraph 5 refers to irresistible force. Any person who acts under the compulsion of irresistible force. So, naay nag-compel niya, naay nagpugos, irresistible force, okay? Any person who acts under the impulse of uncontrollable fear. So, naa siya impulse of uncontrollable fear of an equal or greater injury. And 7th is any person who fails to perform an act required by law. So, this is an example class of felony by omission, di ba? We mentioned before nga naatay gitawag og felony by a felony is defined as an act or omission. So, felony can also be committed by not acting when a positive act is required by law. Okay? So, again, ayaw jud kalimtin ninyo, mao ni akong giingon ninyo class nga dili jud mahimo ang criminal law nga inyo bitaw siyang tun-an nga piecemeal. Dili, dapat inyo siyang i-connect. You have the magic of connection. That is why it is very important that you learn the basic. Katong mga basic nga atong mga na-discuss sa una, swerte tong mga nagtuon og klaro kay makasabot siya and makarelate siya sa atong gipanghisgutan karon. Pero kung dili gali ninyo tun-an tong mga nanggion na class, it is very impossible for you to understand unsa ning mga nagsunod nga mga lessons. Okay. So again, this felony is either an act or an omission. So this is number 7 refers to an exempting circumstance which may be kaning availed of by any person who fails to perform an act nga required by law, pero prevented siya, ma-exempt siya because prevented siya by some lawful insuperable cause, an insuperable cause. Okay, so let's go to the details. Paragraph 1, insanity or imbecility. Okay, so unsa man gaya ning imbecile class? Imbecile kana makadungog ta sa mga drama bitaw sa kaning kuan kato mga Tagalog sa una nga mga imbecile, mga mangmang. Okay, unsa may imbecility? So, imbecility class is different from being insane. Ang imbecile class is one who while advanced ang iyang edad has mental development comparable to that of a child between 2 and 7 years of age. Okay, so daghan ba ta mga classmates nga ingon ani class nga mga advanced na unta ang mga edad pero ang buot 2 years or 7 years old. So, mo na sila, gitawag na silang mga imbecile kung naa. Pero sa akong duda, murag wala man sa atong class, no? Kay naabi atay mga banggiitan man mga utok, no? So, these persons, kani mga imbecile, kani mga group of persons nga gitawag na tong imbecile, exempt ni sila in all cases from criminal liability. Okay, insanity, insane. There is a complete deprivation of intelligence and committing the act but capable of having lucid intervals. Okay, ang insane jud class, complete deprivation jud na siya of intelligence, meaning dili jud siya maka-assess whether the thing he has done is right or wrong. So, mo na siya ang insanity. Pero, ang insane person is capable of having lucid intervals. Unsa man yung mga lucid intervals, class? Kaning lucid intervals, class, this refers to the kaning bitawng instances nga naabit makuan bitaw siya, mabalikan siya sa ihang buot ba. Okay? So, kaning insanity man good, class, na siya mga kaning episodes. So, naapoy mga episodes nga normal siya. Okay? So, kung natunong gali nga ning perform siya sa criminal act while normal siya, he cannot claim the exempting circumstance of insanity. Okay? So, these are the rules relating to insanity. During a lucid interval, the insane acts with intelligence and thus is not exempt from criminal liability. Insanity is a defense in the nature of confession and avoidance. Of course, confession, meaning mo angkon jud ka sa guilt nimo. Malamang, lisod pod kaayo og moingon kag depensa kag insane man ko ana nga tayma. Kung dili ka mo angkon in the first place, ning angkon jud ka nga yes, na-commit yun anako ng mao nga krimen. Pero during the time when the crime was performed or during the execution of the crime, I was not kanang lako, complete deprivation sa intelligence kay mao to ang episode nako nga nabuang ko. Okay, so mo nang gitawag og confession and avoidance. Kay imo jud na siyang angkonon nga yes, you have done the act, pero during the time nga imo nang gi-perform, imo siyang kanang at nga time buang ka, okay, and must be proved beyond reasonable doubt. However, there is another school of thought nga that believes nga ang insanity kuno, as with other such defenses, need only to be proved to a degree sufficient to raise a reasonable doubt of guilt. Okay, yes, of course, I adhere to this second school of thought. Kay nga naman, ang proof ang nag-require ramang good og quantum of evidence nga a quantum of proof nga kaning proof beyond reasonable doubt kay ang kwan mo guna siya ang prosecution to prove the guilt of the accused. So kani defense maguni siya, class. So I do not think it is my humble opinion nga kaning the proof beyond reasonable doubt is not required to for your defense of kanini ang insanity. Ngano man dili man gud ang accused or dili man ang defense ang magkanang raise anang proof beyond reasonable doubt. Kinsa man day mo establish ana, ang mag-establish ana ang prosecution jud kay na mo na require sa kanang criminal law nga ang conviction must be had by proof beyond reasonable doubt. Ngano man siya tungod kay naamong gitawag sa atong constitution, part of the right of the accused is presumption of innocence. So kung kinsa ang magpasaka og kaso nga mosulti nga kanini siya mao inig buhat sa krimen, siya ang naay burden to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the person committed the crime. Okay? So what are the evidence of insanity? So, evidence of insanity must refer to the time preceding the act under prosecution or before. Dapat ang evidence ko no magpresent kung magpresent gali kag evidence kung ikaw kintahay Mr. A, ikaw kintahay ang akusado. Di ba tungod kay confession and avoidance man ni siya ang insanity? Ning angkon ka, confession, ni angkon ka sa guilt, yes, I did the crime, I committed the crime. Avoidance, imuha nga gi-avoid ang criminal liability by saying nga, during that time, nga gi-commit na ko ng mao nga krimen, kuan ko, kanang wala ko sa sakto nga pangutok. So, buang, ning tukar ang akong pagkabuang ana nga tayma. So, unsaon man nimo pag-prove nga insane ka during, aron madawat ning defense of insanity, exempting circumstance of insanity. So, your evidence must of insanity must refer to the time preceding the act under prosecution. So, it's either before, dapat na buang ka before sa act, or at the very moment of its execution. So, dapat before hangtod during the act of execution sa kanang krimen, mao ni siya ang imuhang i-prove nga buang ka during these periods. Ngano man, Kung mo prove manggod ka nga subsequent na, meaning kaning kuan kanang subsequent to the commission of the crime na siya, dili na sa exempting, ano man, malamang di man kabuang atong time nga nag-execute ka. You have to remember, class, that insanity must refer to the time preceding, before, or during the jud sa execution sa krimen mo nang ma-exempt ka. Pero kung nabuang ka after na sa pag-commit sa krimen or during na sa trial, then you cannot claim the exempting circumstance of insanity. Always remember your tanawar gud an imbecile or an insane person, unless the latter has acted during the lucid interval. So has committed, when an imbecile or kanang insane person has committed an act which the law defines as felony, the court shall order his confinement in one of the hospitals or asylums established for persons thus afflicted, which he shall not be permitted to leave without first obtaining the permission of the same court. The same court, dapat inyo na siyang timanan. Kay kung kang pangutanon mo na ako sa unsay nga nini ang exam, ingnon mo na ako ang gipasakahan sa kaso sa RTC, unya karon ning claim siya insanity, gi-confine siya karon ning file siya dito sa family court. Ingon kitay ko nimo, ning file siya dito sa family court. The same RTC gyapon siya, pero lahi na siya nga RTC nga dili dito pending ang kaso. So if I ask you during the exam, dito siya ning file nga kuaning hatag na ngayo siya order sa court kana mao nga family court to be permitted to leave. So dili siya allowed kay diri sa article paragraph 1 nag-require siya nga the same court kung asa pending ang imong criminal case, maoy dapat mo hatag nimog order permitting you to leave the asylum or hospital. So you have to remember, class, again nga ang insanity, class, must be during the execution of the crime. So if I ask you during the exam, true or false, kanang A, B, and C committed the crime. So B kanang confessed his guilt, but kanang offered as defense nga siya, insane siya after the commission of the crime. Is B exempted from criminal liability? Yes or no? Of course, no. Nga naman, ang evidence of insanity per paragraph 1 must refer to the time preceding, before, or at the very moment or during the execution of the crime. Okay? Cases covered under this article. So, unsa may mga covered aning term nga insanity. Okay? Insanity and imbecility. Okay. So, unsa man ang mga covered? Number 1, dementia praecox. Okay, old ni siya nga kanang term, class, nga wala na siya gigamit sa mga practitioners karon. Pero kaning dementia, kadungog naman mo anak, class, uy, kay numdum mo sa atong the notebook, dementia ba tong iya nga sakit nga katong kuan or Alzheimer's, basta dementia. Okay, dementia praecox. Okay. Unsa pa, kleptomania, if found by a competent psychiatrist as irresistible. So, epilepsy, covered ni siya ani nga kaning term nga insanity. Somnambulism. Unsa man somnambulism? Sleepwalking by virtue of People versus Taneo. Kanini siyang Supreme Court decision, class. Mao ni siya ang nag-rule nga ang somnambulism is covered by paragraph 1. Nga exempting siya nga circumstance. Next, malignant malaria, which affects the nervous system. Kay kaning malaria, mga good class, kana bitaw magkakaon mo nga gipanglangawan, nya kanang langaw nagdaan na siya og mga something mga bacteria ug uban pang mga malalang sakit. Natungod ana natakdan ka, naka-contract kag malaria. Kaning malaria, mga good class, moabot na sa imong utok, sa imong nervous system, mowad-an ka sa saktong panimuot. Okay? So naabay mga gipang malaria sa atong klase or wala? Okay, hopefully wala Okay, so unsa may effect sa exempting circumstance of insanity or imbecility? Okay, so effect din is exempt siya from criminal liability. What is the basis? Again, there is a complete absence of intelligence. So we have to go back, class, sa distinction between justifying circumstance and exempting circumstance. Kato akong initial nga di-discuss sa previous recording nako, Justifying circumstance gali class, wala joy crime nga na-commit. Ngano man kay ang act sa person is in accordance with law. Okay? Ang exempting circumstance class naay crime nga na-commit. Naa joy crime nga na-commit. Pero there is no criminal. Nganong wala may criminal? Because the person performing the act or the crime is kanang walay intelligence and walay freedom. Hence, walay actor, walay criminal actor. So, walay criminal, therefore, walay criminal liability. Pero while wala siya criminal liability, because crime gihapon ang iyang gi-commit, there is civil liability sa exempting circumstances. Except sa unsa man to nga paragraph, accident. Paragraph 4. Okay. So, what are the juridical effects of insanity? So, if present, mao ni siya akong giingon nga rules, you need to remember this. If present ang insanity at the time of the commission of the crime, exempt siya from liability. Pero if present siya during the trial na, meaning after na siya na-commit ang krimen, the trial will be suspended and accused is committed to a hospital. Pero if the person becomes insane class after judgment or while serving sentence, execution of judgment is suspended, the accused is committed to a hospital. The period of confinement, however, you need to remember this, confinement niya sa hospital is counted for the purpose of the prescription of penalty. Okay? So, kanusa gali, kung if I ask you during the exam, kanusa ka dapat insane para mahimo kang exempting, makaklaim ka sa exempting circumstance, dapat during the execution of the crimen or kaning kuan sa kana preceding to the crime. Pero kung after nagali ka, dili na siya ha, exempting nga circumstance. Okay, let's go to minority. What is the effect of minority? Again, exempt, malamang. Maubitaw na naa siya sa Article 12, exempting circumstance siya. So what is the basis? Complete lack of absence or lack of intelligence. Intelligence gapon ang wala ni class. So, again, paragraphs 2 and 3 sa minority were superseded by RA 9344. Kato akong giingon ganina, RA 9344 is JJWA revised or amended by RA 10630. So nanatay amendment ani. So kanis JJWA, Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act, mao ni siya ang nga law kanang rules nga naglay down sa mga mekanismo o katotoang mga process and proceedings nga i-undergo kung ang nag-commit sa mao nga krimen is called CICL or Children in Conflict with Law. Okay, so you have to kaning perform this assignment class, kaning assignment 2. Ayaw dyan ni siya kalimtin ninyo because I will check this after the midterms. Assignment 2 is you need to research and tabulate the original provisions of RA 9344 versus the amendatory provisions of RA 10630. Ngano importante man class tungod kay ang RA 10630 class mo na mo kuno siya ang bago nga balaod. So basin ba og ma-misled mo nga RA 9344 gihapon ang applicable provisions. So nay mga provisions sa RA 9344 nga wala ma-amend. So, you need to identify kung unsa tong na-amend, kay kung unsa magalitong original provision nga na-amend na, dili na to nimo i-apply. Pero kung katong mga original provisions sa 9344, wala pa ma-amend, of course, you still apply the provision sa RA 9344. You need to identify and highlight the old provision versus the changes or amendments. I will post this sa inyong nga GC. You need to do this, perform this. So, let's go to RA 9344 or the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act. Okay? Also refer to PD 603 or the Child and Youth Welfare Code. So, mao ni siya ang definition, Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act. Unsa man ni siya? It is a system dealing with children at risk and children in conflict with law, which provides child-appropriate proceedings. Unsa man ni mga child-appropriate proceedings? Example, prevention, diversion, rehabilitation, reintegration, and aftercare to ensure their normal growth and development. What is a CICL? We mentioned a while ago na child who is alleged as alleged as or alleged pa siya, accused or na-file na siya og information, or adjudged, meaning naanay judgment as having committed an offense under Philippine laws. Mo ni siya ang CICL or child in conflict with law. What is the minimum age of criminal responsibility under RA 9344 as amended by 10630? The minimum age of criminal liability is 15 years, at least 15 years of age or below. So mo ni siya under section 6, a child 15 years of age gali siya or under at the time of the commission of the offense shall be exempt. Exempt siya ha, 15 years or under at that time of the commission. However, the child shall be subjected to an intervention program. So intervention ha, 15 years old and under at the time of the commission, intervention siya. Exempt siya sa criminal liability. Next, a child above 15 or meaning 15, iya kita yung birthday is September 21. So, na-commit niya ang crime is September 22. Okay? 15 days and 15 years and 1 day siya. Okay? Above 15 years old but below 18 years of age shall likewise be exempt. Exempt siya sa criminal liability kung wala siya mo commit with discernment. Okay, duha na inyo padulong nga kay numdum mo ato akong gisuwat sa blackboard class. Kung mutungtong nagali siya above 15 years old, 15 years old and 1 day nagali siya and below 18. You need to remember class nga duha ni siya ang padulngan. First, if the child acted with discernment, and second is if the child acted without discernment. So unsa man ang mahitabo kung ato sa without discernment aning idara at the time of the commission of the offense? The child shall be exempt from criminal liability and subjected to intervention. So, pareha siya sa katong under 15. Okay? 15 years or under. Intervention siya and exempt from criminal liability. However, kung 15 years and 1 day na siya but below 18 but he acted with discernment, such child shall be subjected to appropriate proceedings. Unsa man ang gitawag ani nga appropriate proceedings? This is what we call as diversion. You will learn later on. Diversion ang padulngan ani. So the exemption from criminal liability herein established does not include exemption from civil liability. So while exempted ang child, again, dili jud siya ma-exempt sa civil liability. So ang mga ginikanan in town mo ay magsapupuan ni iyang civil liability kato mga damages o sa tuig iyang mga bayronon kung naakitay siya na harm or na injure nga person na hospital kintahay kanang gastuhon sa hospital dili ma-exempt si child ana. Okay, kinsa man amok sapupo ang malamang ang ginikanan. Okay? So determination of age. Okay. Sa determination of age, you need to refer to Section 7 of RA 9344. There is what we call as presumption of minority. Meaning, ang child, kung wala pagalina nato ma-identify, especially namong mga putot, kani mga grupo sa mga putot sama ni ma'am, nga maaan bitawong 12 anyos. So, of course, naaman yung instances nga ang magmahibaw ka date so no, nagdaday ng maong nga bata o kaning birth certificate while ni commit siya sa krimen, wala man, diba? So, at that time of the commission of the offense, madakpan manggali siya, dili siya kahibaw pila edad ani nga bata. Pero, there is what we call as presumption of minority. So, the child, ang pasabot ang presumption of minority, the child in conflict with law or the CICL shall enjoy all the rights of a child in conflict with law under until she is proven or he is proven to be 18 years or older. So the age of a child may be determined from a birth certificate, baptismal certificate, or any other pertinent documents. In the absence of these documents, age may be based on information from the child himself, testimonies of other persons, the physical appearance of the child. So nabi mga tao no nga bisan pa og tiguang na kayo, bata pa kayo siya tanawon, or naapoy bata pa kayo pero tiguang kayo tanawon. So physical appearance pwede siya gamiton and other relevant evidence. Pero in the absence ni siya aning tulo kaning nag-una. Okay? So in case of doubt as to the child's age, it shall be resolved in her favor, meaning tungod sa presumption of minority under Section 7 RA 9344, mo enjoy siya sa mga rights nga gilay down ani nga mao nga balaod. bisan kay wala pa man siya ma-prove nga 18 years old siya or above. Okay? What is meant by acted with discernment? Diba? Akong nganong galing importante ning acted with discernment because anhi man guni magdaog class sa katong 15 years old na gali siya and one day to below 18 years old. Kay kinahanglan na to i-identify whether na siya discernment or wala. So, kung walay discernment, again, intervention, exempt from criminal liability. Kung i-acted with discernment, mo padung ta sa diversion. Unsa nang diversion? Hala, pagtuon mo ana, mo to nga mo ni nga assignment nako 9344. Kay inyo na ma-learn sa inyong special penal law. You have to tabulate. Okay, unsa man ning discernment class? Discernment means mental capacity to understand the difference between right and wrong. Okay? It is manifested through unsa man manner of committing a crime. So for example, when a minor committed the crime during nighttime to avoid detection or took the loot to another town to avoid discovery, this manifests discernment. Nga naman, kay bawo siya nga wrong. Kay ang discernment mangod class is to identify the difference between right and wrong. So tungod kay bawo siya nga wrong, mo nang nighttime niya gi-commit ang crime kay aron di siya ma-detect, hindi siya masakpan. Okay? Sa manner of committing a crime, mahibawaan ninyo nga ning act dyan na siya with discernment. Next, conduct of the offender. Kani, the accused shot the victim with his slingshot and shouted, "Putang ina mo." Okay. So kana, klaro kayo, it shows discernment. Or what if the child, after kanang shooting the victim namatay ang victim, nindagan siya, nahadlok siya, or ning escape siya, nagtago-tago siya. That shows discernment. Nga naman, again, discernment is the mental capacity to understand the difference between right and wrong. And because of that, because of his kaning action nga iyang napatay, he knows nga wrong. So, man na nagtago-tago siya. So, makita na dyan siyang discernment class, aning manner of committing a crime or conduct of the offender. Okay. Exemption from criminal liability due to minority rules. Summarized rules ni siya. Okay, ha? 15 years old or below, again, at the time of the commission, absolutely exempt from criminal liability but subject to intervention. Over 15 years old or 15 years old and one day but below 18, exempt siya from criminal liability and subject to intervention program if wala siya'y discernment. If he did not act with discernment. But if he acted with discernment, he is subject to diversion program. Below 18 years old are exempt from the following status offenses: vagrancy and prostitution, mendicancy, sniffing of rugby. So, mo ni siya ang mga offenses nga under your RA 9344, dili pwede nga makakommit ang usa ka minor. Unsa may tawag sa minor? Kanang below 18 years old. Pero kung 18 years old nagalik ka, ay paghisgot tay, criminally liable na jud ka. If the child is found guilty of the offense charge, unsa man ang mahitabo, automatic suspension siya of sentence. This refers to a child 15 years old and one day or under 18 years old who acted with discernment. Katong mga child gani class nga 15 years and one day to below 18 years old, if he acted with discernment, ipadayon man ko ng iyahang kaso class. However class, mo ni siya, at the time of, once the child who is under 18 years of age at the time of the commission is found guilty, mahimo gani siyang guilty class during the trial of the offense charge, the court shall determine and ascertain the civil liability. Again ha, dili exempt ang bata sa civil liability. However, instead of pronouncing the judgment of conviction, the child shall place the child in conflict with law under suspended sentence without need of application. Meaning, bisan pag nakonbikto ang bata nga 15 years old and one day to under 18 years old who acted with discernment, bisan pag nakonvict siya class, dili i-execute ang sentence. Okay? Dili i-pronounce ang judgment of conviction, pero himo i-suspend siya ang sentence bisan pag dili mo file og motion without need of application, meaning walay need nga mo file og motion ang abogado sa bata. Okay? Provided, however, that the suspension of sentence shall still be applied even if the juvenile or the CICL is already 18 years old or more at the time of the pronouncement of his guilt. So ang imuha nga kanang timan-an na jud class nga kung moabot na siya 18 years old during sa pronouncement sa iyang guilt, dili na siya kuan class kanang dili na mausab ang iyahang criminal liability. Considered gihapon siya, mo enjoy gihapon siya sa balaod nga 9344 tungod kay ang basihan lagi nato class is at the time of the commission of the offense. Dapat wala pa siya musud sa 18 years old. So bisan pag during the kanang pronouncement na sa judgment later or during trial na 18 years old na ang bata, dili jud gihapon maapektuhan ang suspension sa iyahang sentence. Okay, so upon suspension of sentence and after considering the various circumstances of the child, the court shall impose the appropriate disposition measures as provided in the Supreme Court rules on juveniles in conflict with law. Okay, so di ba niingon man ko ninyo class nga isunod siya sa diversion program. So after diversion program gali class, upon recommendation sa social worker who has custody sa child, after sa diversion the court shall dismiss the case against the child whose sentence has been suspended and against whom disposition measures have been issued, and shall order the final discharge of the child if ang court finds the objective of the disposition measures have been fulfilled, meaning na rehabilitate ang bata. Okay? Pero na magoy mga bata class nga gitawag na tong incorrigible. Unsa man ni mga batang incorrigible? Mao ni ang mga bata nga kana jung di jud kanang tang-an na jud ba nga klaro na jud kaayo nga magbalik-balik na jud gihapon, repetitive gihapon ang ilahang kanang commission sa mao nga offense. Dili man guni sila prisuhon class, di ba? Buhian man ni sila. So while kanang naa sa diversion program ang good class, di man jud kakakuan nga ang kaning mga social worker nagbantay niya di ba at all times. So na jud nay mga possibility nga ang bata mag-commit jud gihapon na siya kanang offense. Okay, so mo ni gitawag og mga incorrigible. So, pero kung makita nila nga ang bata na rehabilitate or na kuan ang bata na tarong siya during the diversion program, the discharge of the CICL shall not affect if the court finds nga ang objective sa disposition measures or katong diversion have been fulfilled, i-discharge na siya nga bata. Pero again, the discharge of the child, the CICL shall not affect the civil liability. The civil liability stands. Okay, which shall be enforced in accordance with law. Okay, the exemption from criminal liability shall not include exemption from civil liability. Again, you have to remember that. So let's go to accident. Accident is something that happens outside the sway of our will, and although coming about through some act of our will lies beyond the bounds of human foreseeable consequences. So may pasabot aning ano bang labad man kayo ning English, okay? Pasabot ra accident. Wala nimo tuyo wala planuha o malamang na baday poy aksidente nga imong giplano, di ba? So under Article 12 class, paragraph 4, the offender is exempt not only from criminal but also from civil liability. Okay? So, mao man ni siya nga kung giingon nga exception class, di ba? Ang justifying circumstances, exempt siya sa criminal liability, exempt pod siya sa civil liability. Mao na ang justifying Ang exempting circumstances tungod kay naadjay criminal act, naadjay offense nga na-commit, pero wala lay actor or walay criminal tungod kay lack of intelligence and lack of freedom. Wala siya criminal liability, naa siya civil liability. Mo na ang general rule sa exempting circumstances. Walay criminal liability but naay civil liability. However, unsa man ang exception. Ang exception na is ang paragraph 4 or ang accident. Ang accident class na walay criminal liability pero naay civil liability. Okay? What are the elements of accident? A person is performing a lawful act. Kung ang imo galing gi-perform is criminal act, dili ka maka-claim og accident as exempting circumstance. With due care siya. Okay, with due care. So due care. So dili dapat kuan, dili wala jud ka magdinanghag. Walay negligence. He causes an injury to another by mere accident without fault or intention of causing it. Okay? So what is the basis why the perpetrator is exempted? Lack of negligence and intent. Okay. So you have to remember class nga kaning accident class dapat dili jud masulod sa kulpa ug sa dolo. Ngano man ang fourth element manggod class without fault or kulpa or without intention, meaning wala po'y dolo. So dapat ang iyahang nga gi-perform class is performing jud siya of a lawful act nga walay negligence, walay with due care siya. Okay? So let's go to paragraph 5, irresistible force. So what are the elements that the compulsion is by means of physical force? Physical force, class. Physical force ang irresistible force. Dili siya pwede nga gikuan lang ka kana bitawng kanang saywar bitaw ka class nga ikuan kitay ka, i-threaten ka pero kuan lang murag i-threat ka na psychological ang pag-threat sa imuha. Dili, ang irresistible force under paragraph 5 must be by means of physical force. Second, the physical force must be irresistible. Third, the physical force must come from a third person. So note, before a force can be considered to be irresistible, it must produce such an effect on the individual that in spite of all resistance, it reduces him to a mere instrument and as such incapable of committing the crime. Kana bang irresistible force bitaw class nga tungod kay gikuan kaniya kanang naa siya'y buhat sa imuha nga kaning violence, makompel ka nga to perform a crime tungod kay gikuan na ka kanang gi-torture kintahay ka ingon ana. So while you committed the crime, by virtue of your lack of freedom and your lack of voluntariness on your part or sa pag-perform sa krimen, tungod kay napugos ka sa irresistible force, mo nang ma-exempt ka from criminal liability. To be exempt from criminal liability, a person invoking irresistible force must show that the force exerted was such that it reduced him to a mere instrument. Meaning, wala na siya'y utok, wala na siya'y freedom sa kaugalingon. Instrument na lang siya. Nga siya na lang ang nagpull sa trigger tungod kay gi-torture pod siya. Okay? So and who acted not only without will but against his will. So unsa ang basis nganong exempting circumstance ang irresistible force? Because of the complete absence of freedom. But remember, irresistible force refers to physical force. Okay? So paragraph 6, uncontrollable fear. Elements that a threat which causes the fear of an evil greater than at least equal to that which he is forced to commit, and that it promises an evil of such gravity and imminence that the ordinary man would have succumbed to it. Okay, nganong complicated man jud kayo ang English ani. Pasabot ra ni class nga ang threat ko no nga nag-cause sa iyang fear sa person ha, ikaw kitay claiming the kanang exempting circumstance of uncontrollable fear. Dapat ikaw nga nahadlok sa evil, kuan ka, ang threat nga imong gikahadlukan is greater siya or at least equal to sa imuhang gi-commit nga krimen. Okay? So for example, kuan kintahay ka, kuan kitay kaniya, gihadlo kaniya nga iyahang patyon kintahay ang nakakita ka nga gitiunan na ang imuhang asawa. Okay? Kung dili nimo pusilo na si Mr. X, ako ning it-pull ang trigger ani ni ang sa ulo sa imong asawa. So kana uncontrollable fear siya. Unya ang imuhang crime nga gi-commit is at least equal sa imong gikahadlukan. Okay, mo na siya ang number 1 element. That it promises an evil of such gravity. Ang katuko nung imong gikahadlukan nga evil, ang gravity ana an imminence that an ordinary man would have succumbed to it. Meaning, ang usa ka person tungod sa ang kato iya gikahadlukan nga evil is ang gravity niya or ang imminence, ang kanabang pagka-sure nga mahitabo jud siya ba. is kana ang effect niya ang ordinary nga tao kuno mo submit na laman jud siya. Kaning succumb meaning mo submit na lang siya sa katong nagsugo niya. Okay? Tungod sa iyang uncontrollable fear nga kana iyang nakit-an nga gitiunan na ang iyang asawa. So kani nga threat kani uncontrollable fear class, you have to remember nga ang threat gali siya of future injury is not enough. Future injury ha dili pwede. Nga ang gihimo nga threat sa imuha ang evil nga imong gikahadlukan dili dapat future injury ha. The compulsion must be of such a character as to leave no opportunity to the accused for escape or self-defense in equal combat. Kanang wala jud kay chance nga makapangandam. Dili siya future nga threat kay kung i-ask mo na ako sa exam unya future gali ang threat or evil nga gi-impose or gihatag gibala or gilabay sa imuha sa katong imuha nga katong tao nga nagcompel nimo, kung future gali ang threat or future injury gali ang gihadlok sa imuha, dili ka ka-claim ha og uncontrollable fear. Dapat imminent jud siya. Imminence, ang imminence niya naa na jud siya, immediate naa na jud siya. Okay? Sure siya nga mahitabo, dili kay future. Okay? So, unsa ang kanang basis nga no ang controllable fear is an exempting circumstance because there is complete absence of freedom. Malamang, tungod sa imuhang kahadlok, nakuan jud ka na reduce ka to a mere instrument. Unsa may pasabot na mere instrument? Wa na kay utok ba? Wa na kay freedom. Di na ka tao. Nahimo na lang kang sulugoon nga mupul ka sa trigger aron mapatay nimo to kay gihadlok man ka. Okay? So, what are the differences or the distinctions between irresistible force and uncontrollable fear? Irresistible force class is your paragraph 5. Uncontrollable fear is your paragraph 6. So, what are the differences? Ang irresistible force class, you have to remember, unsa galito, ang irresistible force it is a physical force. So, dili siya pwede nga saywar-saywar lang. Irresistible force must operate directly upon the person of the accused. Meaning, katong person nga ning claim sa exempting circumstance. And the injury feared may be lesser degree than the damage caused by the accused. So, basta directed sa imuha, ikaw nga nag-claim sa exempting circumstance, unya directed sa imuha ang irresistible force, katong physical force, wala mag-require ang balaod nga dapat ang imuhang kaning gi-perform nga o kaning imong force nga gikahadlukan or kaning force nga gitira sa imuha must be greater or equal to sa crime nga imong nakomit. Dili. Maybe lesser ang katutuang force nga gibala sa imuha or gibuhat sa imuha than the injury nga imuha nga makomit or the damage nga imuhang mabuhat sa lain nga tao. Okay? Uncontrollable fear. Unsa man pud ang uncontrollable fear? May be generated by threatened act directly to a third person such as the wife. So, ang uncontrollable fear class, kato akong gihimo nga example ganina, dili necessarily sa person claiming the exempting circumstance. Okay? Pwede siya nga gi-direct ngadto sa iyaha nga family. Uncontrollable fear directly to a third person such as the wife, but the evil feared must be greater or at least equal to the damage caused to avoid it. So, for example class, kaning ang imong gikadlukan kato akong gihimo nga kanang illustration ganina nga gitiuran kitay ang imong asawa sa maong kaning pistula. Uncontrollable fear siya. So, ang imuha nga gibuhat para mo avoid ka sa imong fear is imo na lang sundon ang sundon lang nimo ang katotoang sulti sa imuha nga katong naghadlok nimo. So, diri sa uncontrollable fear class, gi-require siya nga ang fear nga imong gikahadlukan, the evil fear evil feared must be greater or at least equal sa damage nga imong mabuhat. Okay? Sa irresistible force class, the offender uses physical force or violence to compel another person to commit a crime. Okay? Again ha, physical violence, physical force. Remember, irresistible force. Pero ang controllable fear class, intimidation or threat in compelling another to commit a crime is sufficient. Okay? So, uncontrollable fear, intimidation ra siya, dili necessarily physical force, sufficient na siya. Okay, so let's go to insuperable or lawful causes under paragraph 7. So, unsa man ang insuperable cause? It means insurmountable. So, kung anong gamitan man yung mga ingon nanin in English. Insurmountable class meaning dili matukib. Yung samot o kadi dili makuan ba? Dili ma-surmount, dili siya kanang sa sabi saya class, oy Ginoo ko kani manggong mga kuan ba na belong bitaw ta sa mga generation nga kuan na mga GG dili na kayo ka mao Bisaya. So unsa may Bisaya ani insurmountable pangitaan na lang sa dictionary class B. Kuan ni siya kanang dili makabot ba o dili nimo siya ma-prevent kana mao na siya ang insuperable or insurmountable. A cause which has lawfully or morally or physically prevented a person to do what the law commands. Mao na ang insuperable. Okay? So what are the elements? That an act is required by law to be done. So naadyo required by law nga butang positive act nga dapat buhaton. That a person fails to perform such an act. Mani akong gimension ninyo ganina nga felony by omission na ay required positive act nga gi-require sa balaod pero wala ka maka-perform sa mao nga butang. Unsa man ang rason nganong wala ka maka-perform? His failure to perform such an act was due to some lawful or insuperable cause. So what is the basis why the person is exempt from kanang criminal liability? Lack of intent. Okay? So ari na ta sa mitigating circumstances class after this recording para easier for you to refer. So sa insuperable cause class mo ni siya ang kaso before we end. Mo ni siya ang kasong nahitabo. People versus Badian. 1936 ni siya nga case. A woman cannot be held liable for infanticide when she left her newborn child in the bushes without being aware that she had given birth at all. Merong ganon nga di makahibaw nga nanganak siya. May kasakit ang mga anak. Severe dizziness and extreme debility made it physically impossible for Badian to take home the child, plus the assertion that she didn't know that she had given birth. Murag, pero tamahimo no kay Supreme Court na ba yan nag-ingon ani class no. So, ningon sa Supreme Court, kaning infanticide banggod class, crime ni siya ko makakommit against a child below 3 years old. Okay? So, unsa man di ay ang, di ba, niingon man ko ninyo class nga ang insuperable or lawful causes, meaning mao man siya mga instances nga crime of omission. Na manggoy kuan class, kaning crime bitaw nga imong abandoning a minor, abandoning a child, abandoning a minor. If you fail to kanang bring home the child or imong gi-abandon, meaning omission, gi-abandon, wala nimo buhata ang dapat unta nimo buhaton. That is a crime of omission. So in this case class, the mother is required by law not to abandon. Kay mao man na siya kanang mao man ang positive act required by law. You should not abandon a child. Pero he fails to perform the act. Wala siya maka-perform sa gi-require sa balaod nga dapat imong dalhon sa balay ang bata, dili nimo i-abandon. So unsa man ang rason nganong wala siya ngano man nga iyang na-abandon man niya, wala man niya mabuhat ang gi-require sa balaod. Because of lawful or insuperable cause. So, unsa man ang insuperable cause ani? Ang reason ko na ani is katong severe dizziness or extreme debility nga physically nawa na siya sa panimuot ba, physically dili na kaya niya nga dalhon ang bata, plus ning assert po siya or ning allege siya, ning claim siya nga wala lagi kuno siya kahibaw nga nanganak siya. So ang bata siguro sama ra ni kadak-on sa coke nga sakto kay ning lusot ra siya nga wa siya kahibalo. Pero we cannot blame class ha, kay Supreme Court na ba na siya class. Ang Supreme Court mabi na ang highest court of the land. So kung unsa iyang decision, we need to submit kay naa na siya kuan na siya reason. So we were not able to read the entire case, but this is just a doctrine. So maybe sa entire case gi-elaborate dito mismo sa court kung unsa jud ang actual na hitabo sa kaso. So we will end the discussion here. We will proceed sa mitigating circumstances. Wait for the recording later. I hope you learned something sa ato nga recording. Thank you.